and welcome back to SecFlux. It is an InfoSec podcast, I would say, with a leadership tilt. Would you
Yes,
would you agree?
I agree.
Or we could call it alternative leadership or
I like to
chaotic
c I like
leadership.
I like to call it leadership, informal leadership, because there's no suit
Informal.
and ties here.
No suit and ties.
No suit and ties.
Something that we all know about Joe is he loves himself a tie. He really likes to wear them as well as suits and suit jackets.
I'll have to meet this Joe you're referring to because clearly it's not me.
Well, um, I have another question for you. I like to start these out with questions.
Okay, ask away.
So, my question is, have you ever asked yourself, how the hell did I get here? Where the hell am I?
Every time I go downstairs.
Yes. Okay. Accurate. So, I was driving the other day, and I know this is going to be a really long way to kind of get to what I want to talk about. And I saw one of the newer Broncos. Have you seen one of those yet?
Ironically, yes, we were talking about this yesterday, while Kathy and I were out running around, and the conversation about the Bronco came up.
Yeah. So, what are your feelings on the new Broncos? I just want to get your
It
gauge.
it it doesn't appeal to my tastes, I'll leave it there.
Okay. Kind of felt the same thing. I used to love the older ones. I really like that era of SUV, kind of the boxier ones. Now I know they're not like safer or whatever. I like the aesthetics of them and I like the time, right? That represented a time in my life that was I don't know, it was different. So, I would say it's around that time of, late 90s, early 2000s, sort of after that too. Um and it made me think of that nostalgia that I have for it. And then I started to think about other things related to that, like what were some other sort of and it could have been anything, right? It was like, what are some shows that I enjoyed at that time? What was the style like at that time? I start to think back and I'm in this sudden mental time capsule and I'm just, looking at all this stuff with kind of these rose-colored glasses and I started to think about weirdly this is how like random my mind can be. I'm going from new Bronco to old Bronco to thinking about serial experiments lane. Have you ever heard of that?
This is a new one. I
Okay.
was still wondering what it was you actually said, if I heard it correctly.
Serial experiments lane.
Okay. Is
All
this like
right.
a series, Netflix series or something?
Okay, so it is a series. It's an anime
Okay.
and it came out in like I think it was in Japan it came out in 1998. Here it came out in 1999. So it was like, again, a very pivotal moment in time. That was pre Twin Towers and all of that. It was pre a lot of changes in our like, history as a nation. And I know again, this is really long. Bear with me. My dogs are super excited about this too.
Amazon's there.
It must be. So the thing about Lane was it wrestled with a lot of different concepts. It surrounded identity, communication, and also this obsession with the regards to the adaptation of the internet. And I think for a lot of us, that's whenever that really started to take off was around the turn of, like Y2K and everything, right? Like that's when a lot more people started to become acclimated to using the internets and computers in general. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I have to agree with that because I was working for a .com, one of the earlier .coms that provided web hosting. It's one of the first web hosting companies at the time. So yes, I agree.
Okay, yes. And I want to get to that too. So, I originally saw Lane on Tech TV, and that's back when the computer and internet was more for nerds, but it was going through that transition. And I like to bring stuff up like this, like I said, because it's really interesting to think about how particular types of media or events really encapsulate what was going on at that time, especially when it comes to technology. So I can think of things in the past, for example, of when I thought something was so technologically advanced or so cool. Everyone thinks of the Jetsons. It's like the first time all of us may have saw the concept of seeing someone else on a screen and talking like how we are right now and being like, whoa, when is that going to happen? That's so futuristic. But the thing of it is, I think there are different points in time in which this happened to the internet as well, right? just in general.
Yeah.
I think there are certain landmarks, and you can look at it like a lot of different ways. You can look at it from, sort of an attack standpoint of how, everything evolved to sort of keep up with the different types of attacks. You can think of it from, an aesthetic standpoint too, of what the internet used to look and feel like compared to what it is now. So that's, when people would actually make their own websites very frequently and they were very creative sometimes, right? As opposed to
Yeah.
now where everything has like sort of a, I don't know, unified or really singular sort of feel. And what I'm getting at is we did have this evolution from, BBS and web rings to this, I would say, almost more corporate, lifeless shopping center that's almost like an abandoned mall. That's kind of how I see the internet now in some ways. There's some community squares, there's a lot of people yelling from megaphones, just saying, really out there things, and everything is just buy, 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 ads, ads, ads. So you had more to start with, this sort of place where people were hobbyists. They would share ideas, they would share interests, they would, it was this really homegrown grassroots feel to everything became this corporate landscape. That's kind of like my vision here in what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Are you still with me? Is everyone still with me?
Yeah. I'm with you.
So that all to say is talking about how I believe that a lot of things that are happening now are kind of a repeat of what may has happened before to a larger degree. And I wanted to talk about, yes, a conspiracy theory, the dead internet theory, and just a little bit and how that also kind of falls into how we see the internet, how we interact with it, and all of that versus how we did then. So I want to get your insight on this particular part because you mentioned the dot com bubble. And I was, I don't know how old I was when that happened. Not old enough to be talking about like financials or business or anything like that. So let's talk a little bit more about that whenever that bubble burst. And do you think that there's a lot that's happening right now that could coincide with what was going on then?
I see a lot of talk on social media that there's going to be another bust, the quote unquote .com bust. I've heard of people say there's an infosec bust, and I think we're seeing some of that now, right? Because we see a number of information security companies laying people off, and I think it was I don't want to name names here because it might be incorrect, but there was a large company that did a lot of security research and provided some security tools. They actually got out of it altogether because that wasn't their core business. Their core business was actually selling servers, computers, laptops, and things like that. And I don't remember. I don't know if I'm. My desk is moving. Hold on.
I see it. That's great.
Yeah, I hit the button. Anyway, so yes, we're seeing some of that quote unquote bust taking place now. Is it going to be as for me? It was horrific, right? Because I was working for .com when this happened, and I remember it because I was on vacation, took a week off, and I came back and I got laid off. And I kind of
Oof.
seen it coming, right? And I was middle management. Middle management's like the first people out the door. And things started to slowly wind down. You see a shift in another direction with the technology and the e-commerce sites. Everybody was banking on e-commerce. It's going to take off and explode and become this thing, and nobody was making a profit. And we're seeing some of that now. People aren't turning a profit. Just take a look at Reddit. I saw that the other day. We're not
Woof.
turning a profit, right? I'm like, you don't have a product, you know, you
You are the product as the user.
right, and you wonder why. So yes, I agree.
Yes. So the reason I bring this all up, and I know I keep like again building to this thing, is obviously something that's on the horizon that's already happening is the influx of AI and all of these different AI products. And we've seen this happen now for a little while, right? We've seen this, I don't know, a revolving door of different things that people kind of latch onto. And I say people, and this is very loosely. So there's certain groups of people that will kind of dig their claws or sink their teeth into these things. So, for some time, we saw NFTs and the rise of that, as well as blockchain. And we saw how those things impacted companies as well. Because, out of nowhere, you have all of these different organizations that are like, look at us, we're hip, we're cool. Hello, fellow kids. Here's our NFT. And they throw a skateboard over their shoulder. And then, a couple months later, they're like, we're sorry, we're sorry. Like NFTs are gone. Um, so I've been seeing a lot of that too. There was this sudden explosion in a blockchain, and everyone wanting to get on that, and now that's of course shifted into AI. So
Yeah.
initial reactions there, just from you.
It's funny you should bring all this up. I was mowing the yard yesterday, and I was thinking about the whole NFT things. Right, all the best thoughts come to me while I'm either mowing the yard or whatever. Right, not
Yeah,
doing this.
I was gonna say I know where this is going. It's usually like I'm going to the bathroom. I need to write this
Yes,
down.
exactly. Right. If only I had a pen and paper. um, yeah. So it feels very scammy, right? The NFT, and I didn't jump on the crypto bus or the NFT
I
bus.
didn't
I
either.
didn't pay a lot of attention to it. Didn't even hardly research it. Right. Just I didn't even want to go down the road. I'm like, okay, I'll see where this is going, and if I have to, I will. But I'm not going to go voluntarily right now. It's like too many other things I'm focusing on, and time is important. So the AI thing, I was also thinking about that, and I've been seeing a lot of talk in posts like AI is going to take our jobs, in information security. And I'm like, and you see the sleazy sales approach. I saw that when I was at Black Hat too. AI does all this stuff, does this, does that, and I'm like, I don't see it happening now, right? I see everybody yelling and screaming they got AI, trying to sell you AI, but the context, you have to have that human element and put in context to it. And we're going to see more of that talk. AI is the best thing since sliced bread. It does everything. You don't need these people anymore. In some cases, that's true. It's absolutely true. But how is it affecting the internet? A lot, like you said, like, if I go back to 2004, 2005, where email, like you can almost argue email was dead, right? Because every damn email you got was Viagra spam or porn spam. Rarely would I get a legitimate email, hardly.
I
And that's
sometimes sorry, I sometimes think about that, like, after I'm gone and someone has to go through my email and they're gonna be like, "Wow, they don't really have" it's all advertisers. It's
right.
like, "Where are your friends?" Just an email.
So if I go to today, what were we tracking down? The internet still being dead, or
It's, so the dead internet theory.
oh yeah. So what's dead now that but makes it look like it's alive? He- well, I go back to email again. Right. Most of the email I get, and I've been on my mission here to unsubscribe from every damn newsletter that I swear I didn't subscribe to, but
I'm
I got
doing
on
the same
anyway.
thing that's so funny. I'm going through and unsubscribing to everything I'm finding.
So basically, Viagra email has become vendor email. Right? I'm selling. We're going to
It's
sell you
true.
this. You need this assessment. You need this. You need that. No, I don't. If I did, I'd reach out to you. Please stop sending me this crap.
It's like when you went do you remember when you used to go to the mall and you'd walk through Macy's and those people would, like, spray perfume in your face?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what it's like. It's
That
like
still
just
happens in Vegas. If you walk down through Vegas, through the shops, like at the Venetian, you still got the people standing outside the shops. Come
ugh.
here. And once you engage in a conversation, it's like stepping in quicksand. You can't get out of it. And
Growing up, I was so afraid of quicksand, and it was metaphorical this whole time.
yeah, right. And looking at it today, where was I going with this? Oh, just opening up a web browser, right? It's so much is based on your data, your what you've accessed online, what you searched for. The stuff that you get from the internet isn't really most of the time what you're looking for. It's what's being pushed to you.
Yes.
So there's that element that's taking over. Like, well, the internet is dead because it's not what it was. And I don't need all this crap being sold to me. I don't need you tracking what I'm doing. I don't need advertisements and everywhere and all this stuff. And I really don't want to see it. But yeah, a lot's changed.
A
Before I
lot
start
has
rambling,
changed. No, that's what this is about, is us rambling and being like, "Rabble, rabble, rabble, dead internet." So, to talk about the dead internet theory, I'm gonna preface and bear with me because it originated on, like, 4chan or Wizard Chan or one
well,
of
that's
the
it. If we're talking
chans.
about stuff from there, I'm logging off. Thanks. This has been
See?
great.
See?
I'm done.
No, take it with a grain of salt because I think the interesting thing about conspiracy theories as a whole and why people do buy into them Sometimes at wholesale is because there are kernels of truth in them. And I think the kernel of truth here is that, this is per Wikipedia's definition, that dead internet theory is an online conspiracy theory that asserts that the internet now consists mainly of bot activity and automatically generated content that is manipulated by algorithm. I always struggle. Algorithmic. There, I did it. I said it. Curation, marginalizing organic human activity. And I think that that in of itself, just that is true.
I I can see why people would think that. I don't think it's actually that bad. I
I think
think that
it's getting there.
I think it becomes very cookie cutter ish looking, right?
Yes.
Because if you look at, going back until the late 90s, early 2000s, websites had their own personality, right? And they were distinct
The
and they looked
Mountain
very
Dew
different.
website, the
Right.
Space Jam website, like,
Right. Now,
oh,
now if you look at websites today, most of them are built with what WordPress or Drupal or something like that. And they all have these templates and how same look and feels for very hollow. It's like going into one of these neighborhoods where the houses all look the same.
it's
It's
like
like,
my house. I have to look
yeah,
for our cars because I don't like
you're
they all
right.
look the same, or, like, the garage, yeah, it's like, sometimes I've passed it up. It's
It,
that easy to do.
and there is a lot of automated content based on your location, the browser you're using, your search history, the tracking cookies, tracking pixels, and things
Mhm.
like that getting pushed out to you because we want to make this experience more in line with what you're looking for. At the same time, they're fairly miserable at it because it looks really bad.
Well, and that's the thing too, like I work in a sales adjacent position, and the thing about it is people don't like to be sold to, right? And
Right.
that's what it all feels like. It's this very invasive thing where you go online and you have all these pop-ups or all these ads or whatever it is. You could be trying to watch YouTube and then there's an ad space and then you have the embedded ads where someone's like doing it within the video and then there are ad breaks and it's just so much. And I wonder if we were to add up all the time in which those happened, or even in a day, like anytime you're advertised to, it's astronomical. I don't think there's a pause sometimes.
I don't. And talking about YouTube and their commercials, I think YouTube, for me, I'm not paying for it, right? And it's broken. Most of the time, I get to an ad and I'm like, I'll go find the resource to find what I'm looking for. I'm not watching your ad. I'm done.
Yep. This podcast was brought to you by uBlock Origin. Actually, it wasn't, but we would like for it to be. So yeah, because and at this point, there's so many things you have to do to, keep. It's almost like there was this episode of Futurama, I think it may have been one of the first ones, where Fry, the main character, was having ads in his dreams, and it feels like that at this point, it really does, because we're
Yeah.
so far along and it's so prevalent that it feels so inescapable. And the whole theory to me in this, because there's other parts of it that people really get into the why behind it, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into the more extravagant things because I think this core of what we're talking about, the actual bot part of it is, you know, pretty true, like I said. But the alleged bot activity, the internet's increase in complexity and how it's become like a bit more fragile in terms of its infrastructure, and all of these advancements in artificial intelligence basically lead me to believe that there's enough evidence that says, hey, this is trending true in some way. In fact, in 2023, Imperva did release a report that stated that more than 47% of internet is just bot activity, and that
I,
happened over the year 2022.
I can believe that, even especially as looking at social media, right? And this is what gets me when I see people freaking out and getting upset about social media posts and arguing in especially ones that are just totally posting totally absurd things is first thing I always think when I see this was it's probably a bot, a nation state bot posting this to create division or to start some kind of drama. And rarely do in my mind do I attribute that to a reasonable person because I mean, like, come on, who the hell would say this? So yeah, I would definitely agree there, especially in social media. And that's
Mhm.
another thing I think causes or contributes to the theory you're talking about is a lot of people perceive the internet as being social media,
Right.
right? And to me, that's really not the internet. That's just like a cesspool of the internet.
It is. It's like the section, it's like, "Okay, now everyone look away. This is the part that we like." they put up like some type of front or a facade, yeah, and
Yeah.
behind it it falls over and you just see like people coming out of this tar pit like ah. um no, and I agree with that too. I think that there are a lot of people that kind of encapsulate social media as the internet when it isn't that. And I think that's especially true, as professionals that work with organizations that have very internet-based jobs. Because again, both of us being in cybersecurity, it's like we see a lot of different facets of the internet and we see how these things collide. So I've also noticed whenever it comes to how everything has evolved, like the different approaches that I think businesses take over time as the internet, keeps morphing into this amorphous continuous blob as time marches on. So I'd mentioned earlier, like some of them get into blockchain, some of them are getting into AI. So in the time since you've been in information security throughout, all of this stretch of time that I'm talking about, how have you seen that transform, like from the business perspective too?
What do you mean?
So, like, whenever businesses are approaching security, are you seeing it more as everyone's like, "We got to buckle down now. We have to take this seriously," or do you think that
So
there's a variation of that?
so it's a sine wave, right? In going back early in my career, like um, all the way back to the late '90s, we didn't know what security was. I mean, I've seen some strange things happening all the way back then where, I'm working in a web hosting company and we provide dedicated servers for people. And I get somebody, one of our clients, email me, "Hey, did you know this is going on in your network?" And he had used a tool to capture usernames and passwords being sent on the network, which is the
Ooh,
internet on public IP ranges. And this particular username and password was for our biggest client. At the time, it was dollar.com. It was dollar rental car.
nice.
And I was like, oh man, this is bad. So now we're looking at how do we secure this? Oh, there's this thing called VLANs. We should make VLANs on our network. So we, stop what we're doing. We go make VLANs, right? And security for most people, where I'm going with this is tires, right? Security is a lot like tires. If you put a tire on your car and it's brand new, it's going to work great. But if you don't rotate it, check the air in it, maintain it, balance it, and you keep driving, guess what's going to happen to that tire? Eventually, that tire is going to fail you in some way. And then all of a sudden, damn, tires are important again. Let's get some better tires. And that's the way security is being faced by a lot of these businesses. Hey, we've done all this work, we're secure. 8, 9, 10 years later, there's a breach, there's ransomware. All of a sudden, like, what happened? I thought we were secure. Well, we were 8 or
10
9
years
years
ago.
ago,
Yeah.
and we haven't done anything since. We spent more on John Strand made this said his comment years ago, and it was true in a company I worked in at the time. And I didn't realize it, right? He said some organizations spend more money on coffee and donuts than they do security. It's absolutely true. I've been there. I've been in those companies. And that's the way some companies, not all, approach security. It's like it's only important after it fails.
Hmm.
It, right.
So it's
So that's
cyclical. Yeah.
it's cyclical. Now there are companies that maintain a high level of security. Usually they have some kind of regulations they have to adhere to contractually or some kind of agreement with a vendor or something like that they have to agree to. And there are those that make the effort to stay secure. Why more often than not, in my own personal experience, I see companies lie about what they're doing for security. They don't have it just so they can get the contract or get the money. And inevitably something happens and it fails. And they're like, oh, we have to go fix this. Well, or there's the other companies that do bolt on security. Oh, we need this. Well, let's just bolt that on here. Instead of having it built in and baked in and be more scalable, now they get this clunking thing where when it fails, it's like all these integral pieces work together or bolted together. And we don't remember how this works because there's no documentation. Now we got to tear it all down and start over and let's do it right. And no, let's just get it back up quickly as we can and keep
It's like
going.
a security potato head. That's what it's
Yeah.
making me think of, or like a chimera.
Yeah.
You're just bolting on parts of this different, like some type of homunculus or animal. Gosh. And so this all makes me think of too, there was a post from Malware Jake that was talking about CTI, cyber threat intelligence. And I think of, I mentioned it before where, you can kind of encapsulate different parts of like the historical landmarks of the internet in attacks as well as defenses too, right? Because the defenses follow the attacks, or the different methodologies that you're using fall in line with the complexity of what's going on, or the critical nature of things. And one of the I don't remember I don't have the post in front of me, but the essential thing that he was saying was most organizations try to do CTI and fail. And I agree with that because of what you're saying, right? Because a lot of organizations see it as a cyclical thing. And in order to have something like cyber threat intelligence and to be very proactive, you have to have everything else, like all of your other bases covered, so you can achieve that sort of, I guess,
Yeah.
higher level of actually, detecting threats before they happen and staying on
y-
top of it.
Yeah, that CTI is tough, right? And,
Mhm.
and especially if you're relying on these third party CTI feeds that may or may not be from organizations similar to you, positioned similarly financially, geographically, and things like that. The context that CTI is provided to you may or may not actually apply to your organization. Plus,
That's true.
attacks or they change, they morph quickly, right? You can try to operationalize around MITRE ATT&CK or the intrusion kill chain or the pyramid of pain, right? But I think what it comes down to is you need real time threat intelligence from your own environment, right? You need to have those sensors, those logs out there being something processing it, let you know, hey, what's happening, identifying it early enough in the attack where you can make changes to prevent it from escalating further. That's the best CTI, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My statement on it was that whenever it comes to, the different places that I see, usually banks do it really well because, I mean, we can all guess why. They will invest a lot of money into security as well
Yeah.
as headcount comparatively to other organizations that just don't. And I'm seeing more talk about things like CTI again and proactive measures, especially with AI more coming to the horizon. So I and this is strictly me talking about LinkedIn and what I'm seeing and the types of things again that are being pushed in terms of advertisements or what people want to get out of you. Um, you know, as you're spending time online from a business perspective, because that's why we're all on LinkedIn, right? It's just
Yeah.
like who gets on LinkedIn on Saturdays and Sundays? Not I, because it feels like work.
Yeah, like LinkedIn is just where people cold call me to sell me stuff. That's about all the value it
Exactly.
has, right?
So I've been seeing a lot of these vendors kind of again moving toward this one of two different things. Like, here's the way you can use our specific, generative AI tool, and there's also here's how you can use the security tool or solution or whatever to prevent AI and cyber attacks, or those sorts of things. So I feel like we're constantly in this sort of ebb and flow of trends and these newer technologies that people are pushing for or against. And whenever it comes to I guess my another question I would like to pose to you is, how have you been seeing any of that in the work that you're doing? Have you been seeing that like in any of the engagements that you're having, or have you seen that kind of out in the wild where those are actually of interest or of note?
AI really hasn't affected what I'm doing, other than I leverage it sometimes for research,
Hmm.
right? If I'm looking for something or trying to sort something out or dig into some code or a particular vulnerability, I might look at different angles in it. And more often than not, it's like querying AI, just like having a conversation with someone that's in a room to formulate my ideas of what I'm going to do next, right? It's not actually giving me the information that actually helps me.
Yeah,
because,
that's how
I
I
mean,
use it too. It's like, finish this sentence, and I'll write half of a sentence, and I'm like, great job, thank you.
right. So in far as the defenses in place for the penetration tests and web app tests that we do, I don't see anyone leveraging AI. Um, it's either web apps, WAFs, or IDS, IPS, something like that. Now there may be AI actually built into the IDF or IPS,
Mhm.
something like that. But most of the time, it is in Azure, AWS. So unless they've adopted that and integrated it, I don't think it's there.
Yeah. I'm not a pen tester, so I haven't seen anything like that either. So I tend to notice that there's this again, I almost want to call it like a land rush or a gold rush or something like that. In terms of this technology where people are just trying to chase their tails over it. Um and push it just because it's the current hype.
Right.
Um
And if
I
they are, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
And if they are leveraging it, based on the reports that I peer review, we have a peer review process in our report approval process. You know, our report production process. You write up a report, it goes to the group peer review. Hey, this actually makes sense. This doesn't make sense, or I don't agree with the way you presented this, or something like that. I see organizations after organizations. We get access to them. We get root. We get DA. We get into their cloud systems. Take over all their assets. I don't see AI working for them if it's out there.
Yeah. And the most questions that I get about it in my line of work, because again, I do a lot of different things. So this is more of the consultative side, is how to write policy surrounding it. That's kind of the questions that I get, or how to like think about it proactively, or to prevent it from leaking company secrets. I get that question a lot.
Your policy writers have to have a hacker mindset, right? And I started reading a book. It's a Bruce Schneier book. I think it's actually called Hacker Mindset. And he has a great, like in the first few pages of the book, there's an exercise he talks about when he's teaching his class. The students on day one, he goes, okay, there's a pop quiz in 2 days. And I want you to write down the first 100 digits of pi. You have 2 days to do this. And he goes, obviously, memorizing these first 100 digits is really, really challenging. So you can cheat, just don't get caught. And this is an exercise to develop a hacker mindset.
Okay,
So,
I'm
so,
listening.
so if you were going to think about it, how am I going to cheat and be able to write down the first 100 digits of pi, that process, and not get caught, by the way, that's the important part. That starts you learning how to think like a hacker. I tried this on my wife at breakfast on Sunday morning. We went to Neighborhood Jam, and she was talking about security and asking me all these questions because she's a ServiceNow admin, and she's talking about security and ServiceNow and implementing it, and what do I think ideas are. And I'm like, I don't know what triggered this conversation. And I finally I got to the part. I'm like, look, as you're doing all this work or coding, just think about ways it could be attacked and try to make sure that you get your bases covered. She was, how do you think like a hacker? And I told her about that exercise, and she was like, well, I wouldn't cheat. And I'm like, that's your first problem.
I'm definitely gonna cheat. I will tell you right now, I do not know the first 100 digits of pi. I am a
I,
nerd, but I'm not that kind of nerd.
I think it's 3.14. I got that part. And I think it's
Yeah,
five
exactly.
nine something or another. But
Past that, I don't know.
how would you cheat? In some of the examples where obviously the easy ones, they write it down on a little piece of paper, under the watch band. Some of the more creative
On your
ones, like,
foot.
oh no, you don't want to
The
be looking at
bottom
your
of your
foot.
foot. Yeah, because then if you wore slip-on shoes, you could just, like, look.
There was the headphones with the hair over the ears and headphones. I'm like, I could pull that one off if I had long hair. I
Uh-huh.
could automate my system to send me text messages and have it read the digits of pi. But ultimately, my personal favorite that I decided on was to collude with the person sitting in front of me and have them wear a special hoodie or shirt where I have symbols on the back representing the character or the digits of pi, like triangles, squares,
Yeah, what if
octagons.
everyone just wore a pie shirt that day? Like, they couldn't stop you. That's not cheating.
I actually have a TCP/IP shirt like that. It's got the packets all broken down and it's upside down, so you can just pull it out. And I got it at Wild West Hacking Fest, like
That's
a year
funny.
2 or 3. You haven't seen them since, but yeah, I won't wash that shirt, won't wear it, but it's there.
So, do you just keep it, like, in case of, fire, break glass, and the shirt's in there, or
Well, I have worn it. I have worn it for briefly a few times, 2 places. Yeah,
you're trying to preserve it? I get
yeah,
you, I
trying
get
to
you.
preserve it.
Yeah, so whenever it comes to the internet mostly being bots, let's talk a little bit more about that, and I don't just mean social media. So, if we're talking about how especially enterprises are using the internet, mean, obviously, there's gonna be a lot of bot activity there, right? And
Yeah.
then we think about how hackers are using bots, there's gonna be a lot of it there too. So in terms of that happening and how that's evolved over time, that could be a couple of different bots or scripts that are collecting information from someone, or let's talk about that landscape and how that's changed from, again, primarily people now to all of these different services that are running. And we're basically, the way that I think of it visually is, if the internet were an actual place, there'd be like all these little drones flying around everywhere, and we're just like, all right, there goes another one.
It's yeah. I picked up a book. Then this is crazy, kind of related to that. And I had this book for about 3 months before I actually give some of my TBR, right? And I finally got to that part of my TBR. I'm like, okay, I'm picking up this book, and the book's called Snow Crash. And I'm reading this book, and like the first few pages, it's talking about the metaverse and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, this must be relatively.
Oh
It was.
gosh, I even forgot to bring up the metaverse. That's how lame it is.
Hold on, it gets really bizarre here, right?
Keep going,
Anyway,
yeah.
and I'm reading this book, and it's talking about metaverse, and I'm like, okay, and it was on a like new release area in Barnes and Noble when I picked this up, and I'm like, well, that must be a relatively recent book, right? And I'm reading this. Then my wife and I were out with a coworker, Philip, and obviously a friend of yours also, and he's talking about books, and he goes, like, Snow Crash is one of my favorite books, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm reading that right now. Right, and he's talking about something in the book. He makes a time reference about when he was reading it. It was like in the previous 10 years. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, we're not talking about the same book. He goes, well, yeah, we are. You got this, and this character did this. I'm like, metaverse. I'm like, yeah, that came out in '92. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, that's out there because it made a lot of predictions about metaverse and online and programming and hacking with their apps and oh yeah, hoarding artifacts, religious
Mhm.
artifacts. I'm like, we don't know of any companies in Oklahoma that have hoarded religious
Ah,
artifacts, have we?
yeah.
Do we know any of those?
Rubs chin inquisitively.
I'm like, so they got a lot of things right, or the author did back then. So that was kind of crazy.
That's kind of the point I was making with Lane earlier too. Even though it's this more extravagant and philosophical sort of anime that's an abstraction of these different ideas, it did get a lot of it right, because it did talk about too how people have these dual identities and how they reconcile with themselves. It's you put yourself out there online, and you can be whoever you want to be, right? You can be a completely different person as it pertains to all these different types of communities that you might interact with. And I think that a lot of media that's like that, or, whether it's a book or whatever it might be, it's really interesting to see how much they get right. Right.
Yeah,
And that's what I meant too with the Jetsons, where it's like seeing that person on a screen was crazy. In Total Recall, when you had the entire TV on the wall, and that sort of thing. I think back to those times, and just now everything's here, and it's like, well, now what? And now we have AI, I guess. That's what.
are we done at this point? AI becomes sentient and we no longer exist. Well, there is a singularity, right? We haven't become one with AI and a machine
Not
yet, so
yet.
there's still
Not
there.
yet. Yeah, so we're still, I'd have to ask Hockey where we're at on the Star Trek timeline, because we're still behind, I think, a particular war that's supposed to happen, some type of like World War III. And then I'm
Yeah,
also thinking it.
like that's not close at all, is it?
Yeah, I know, right? Again, getting it right. And then if we're going by like cyberpunk edge runners, we still have some time before we integrate technology into our bodies that like give us really significant enhancements,
Yeah.
where we can like hack with our minds and stuff.
I've already seen the one guy. He at the time I can't remember the company he worked. I can't remember his name, but he had several RFID chips embedded in his hands.
Yeah, yeah, we saw him at that one
You were
conference.
there,
Yeah, I was there.
Information Warfare Summit.
Yes.
CyberArk. He worked for CyberArk, but I can't recall his name off the top of my head.
I can't either, but I remember what he looks like, and I remember, yeah, he had all of the different,
Yeah,
like the RF sensors and everything, where he could just open a door with his hand. That was pretty cool.
yeah,
I
that
wouldn't
was.
do that personally, but good on
No,
him,
I'm out. I'm out on putting foreign objects in my body.
because I can imagine the infections you might get. Like, no offense to him again, but you're still putting
Yeah,
a chip inside your hand, so,
yeah,
which again, real cool, just not my thing.
yeah. Not for me either. mount.
So what has this are you feeling reflective? Are you feeling introspective?
I'm feeling afraid. I think I'll just log off, burn it all down, and go back to working on cars.
Hey, I mean, we all got to have our thing that's outside of technology. So with that, everyone, burn it all down and work on your cars.
There you go.
We have it. We did it. It's an episode. Yay!
Cool.
Or if you have a Tesla, it'll burn itself for you.
It takes like 35,000 gallons of water to put it out.
Because car fires are a different kind of fire. Well, battery fires.
Yeah, lithium batteries burn very hot and very long.
In case you didn't know that, now you do. We're signing out. This is SecFlux. It's been a day.
Yep.
There we go. I'll stop it.